Okay, welcome back to the July Painting Challenge at the War Games box. We're now looking at day 14, and I've now completed the 30 Years War figures that I was going to paint for the challenge. So as you can see, I've done the musketeers, which have come out very nicely with the red and yellow. Very basic colours, but they're quite effective. And I'm very pleased with those, and that's essentially what was the major part of the challenge. And in addition to that, I've done some light cavalry, which are these arquebusiers, and again they look like they've come out okay. Yeah, the horse is a bit brown and a bit plain, but they'll look fine on the table at 15mm, and certainly from a distance you won't know the difference really with those. Apologies for not posting a little bit sooner. I had actually meant to post on Friday when I'd completed these, but unfortunately I was knackered on Friday and I've been working all over the weekend, so I've not really had a chance to get back and do much in the way of videoing. But now I can post these and they're done. So essentially the July Painting Challenge is now finished, or as it was in terms of its original conception. So in terms of moving on now, I've decided, as I mentioned before, that I might move on to some Napoleonics. I don't have any particular goals with these, but I would like to paint some of them as they've been around for a while. It's a unit that I've not completed and it's annoying me now, so I think I'll probably get on and finish them. Moving on to the questions then, I've got quite a few days to catch up with here, and I'll try and answer these as best I can. So I think the last one that I looked at was day 9, so moving on to day 10. What is your favourite science fiction or fantasy setting or universe? What is it about that setting that draws you in and inspires you? Well, I've always been a big fan of Tolkien. I started reading that when I was about 10 or 11, back in the 70s, and I loved it ever since then. I started with The Hobbit and then I moved on to The Lord of the Rings. I read that over a summer, and I've always loved Tolkien. You just cannot match it in terms of complexity and background setting. I mean, the use of sort of Old English and Nordic runes and what have you, all brought in to make the world a little bit more realistic or feel a little bit more real, in a fantasy setting, which is very strange, but really works very well for me. I loved the films when they came out, but the books are just absolutely amazing, and that's probably where I would the world that I'm most into. For science fiction, probably Peter Hamilton's Commonwealth, again because it's quite complex. Complex things are talked about, like life and death, on a sort of a very sort of cerebral range. Again, a very complex set of worlds, huge books. I mean, we're talking about brick-size books essentially, and they take a long time to read. They're very slow burning, but they are very interesting. Historically speaking, I like the sharp books. I mean, they were what drew me into Napoleonics a while back. I did actually start playing Napoleonics a bit further previous to that, but then I found the Bernard Cornwell sharp books, and they're just amazing. The series is okay, but I would definitely look at the books. The books themselves are just great to read, and they're very entertaining. If any weapon, armour, gadget, vehicle or mythological beast from any sci-fi or fantasy setting were real, which would you want to? Well, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm a historical painter, I'm going to cheat slightly and say that I think the Baker rifle is very interesting, because of the sharp books, because I'm interested in the rifles, but also because it's kind of an interesting technology shift during the Napoleonic period when they start to move away from muskets to rifles, and then you get a whole change in the weapons technology because of that. Again, very interesting. Can't really say much more about that. One fictional character from a science fiction or fantasy universe has stepped forward to defend you from the terrible Gabubu. Who is it? How does the epic battle between your defender and Gabubu play out? I was watching Lance documentary about people about this idea of spotting aliens in space, and they were talking about Dyson spheres, and they were talking about civilizations that could build Dyson spheres, which are essentially energy collecting arrays that are built around stars. And frankly, any civilization that could find enough matter to build it with, but two, actually build a structure around a star to collect energy, I don't think Gabubu would have much chance against them. So I think that's pretty much obvious, really. Building week 2. Share another technique to build up your fellow adventurer's skill set. Again, I'm going to go on soft skills here. I think probably the best piece of advice I could give you is maybe if you find somewhere to paint that is comfortable for you to paint in. I think there's a lot of gamers that tend to go off and paint in sort of cupboards and things like that, or in very cramped space up in the loft or something like that. I actually paint in my sitting room in front of the television on a table that's just set back a bit. There's a lot of advantages to this. Simply one, because I've got any additional space anyway, but I've actually found that I can just sit here, watch the television and have a chat to the missus at the same time, and I don't have to go anywhere to do it particularly. And also, because I'm working on a small table where I don't have a lot of space, I tend to keep the table quite clean and I pack my stuff away quite regularly, so it means that nothing ever gets into a bit of a mess. It does mean that I have to cart my art materials from wherever I store them, but there again, I sort of run quite a lean painting setup, so I think that helps an awful lot. I mean, I know other people prefer different setups, but it seems to work quite well for me, and I think when I move into a bigger property or house eventually, I may keep the setup as it is, but maybe have a few more art materials to hand, set up in one corner of the sitting room where I can work. Weekly wrap up. Did you achieve your week 2 goals? Well, yes, we've pretty much covered that. I'll talk about the dreaded third week. So as I say, I'm going to work on some French Napoleonics, get them painted up, and then if there's more time towards the end of July, I might start on a slightly different project, which I will go into more detail with a bit later. So as I say, effectively the July Painting Challenge 30 Years War stuff is now done, and I'm going to move on to doing some Napoleonics now, just to obviously complete out a project that I'd already started and want to finish off. Okay, that's enough from me. I'll get back to you, hopefully not as long this time, but I will get back to you hopefully the end of this week or middle of this week if I'm doing all right. Okay, see you then. Best of luck with your projects, by the way, as well.